What is going on, collective? Welcome to my channel where we journey through consciousness, spirituality, and the art of manifestation. My name is Devinair, and thank you for watching. In today's video, I'm going to talk about the mass awakening of Generation X, shine light on the phenomenon, and explain why Gen X is experiencing this collective awakening. But first, make sure you subscribe to my channel so you're able to receive the content that I post, and hit that bell notification so you're the first to receive my content. So Generation X are those who were born between the years of 1965 and 1980. They are now the ones who hold positions in major companies, are current CEOs and political offices. With every generation, Gen X experience major setbacks and challenges. For Gen X, they experienced the dot-com bust in 2008 and the financial crisis. They also experience slower career advances, unlike the millennials. Now, in order for me to explain to you the Gen X awakening, I have to introduce you to the generational archetypes and the progressional generational archetypes. The generational archetypes applies to all of us and was mentioned in the book The Fourth Turning by William Strauss and Neil Howe. Strauss and Howe basically explained that generations typically repeat itself within a 15 to 25 year span, which in my opinion makes sense because it's interesting how so many things within history continuously repeat themselves. Strauss and Howe then go on to explain that each generation is created with four archetypes. The first archetype is childhood, and those are the morals that you were brought up and raised under by your parents. The second archetype is young childhood, and that is when you are tested on the morals that you were brought up under in society. The third archetype is midlife, and that is basically you receiving all of the rewards from the hard work and labor that you had put in based upon the morals that you were brought up under. So in this area of life, you are taking in leadership roles and positions of power, if you will. And the last archetype is elderhood, and that is you teaching your generations to come basically everything that you've been taught, essentially just passing down the knowledge onto them. So here's where it gets even interesting. Based off of those four archetypes, Strauss and Howe go on to explain that there are four progressional generational archetypes that are manifested based upon the original four archetypes. So the first one is called high, and those are the prophets. Prophets are the ones that go out and basically change society. They're the ones that were coddled growing up as a child and basically, I don't want to say spoiled, but treated with a lot of love and attention. The second progression generational archetype is the awakening, and those are considered the nomads. The nomads are the ones who had a loose childhood, however, become practical leaders over time. The third progression generational archetype is the unraveling, and those are our heroes. They have a strong sense of duty, however, they face many challenges. And the fourth progression generational archetype is the crisis. And the crisis are our artists of today. These are the ones who are thoughtful and make very compassionate leaders. I lead with this information in today's video because as a millennial, I wasn't aware of this generation formula, this archetype that we have. But again, like I said, it makes sense now because if you start to experience in your reality certain things repeating itself, it comes to an understanding that it's just the generation archetype of the 15 to 25 year cycle continuously repeating itself. I feel as though where we're at now in this present moment, the Generation X is in the unraveling stage. These are our heroes of today, and they are now coming up to the surface and coming to senses as to what is actually happening on in the world. Whereas the millennials, the Gen Zs, and the Gen Alphas are the new artists of today. As most of my upbringing is all about posting content and technology and creativity. So what created this Generation X awakening, and why is it happening right now? We are now in the age of Aquarius, and if you're not familiar with the age of Aquarius, I will go ahead and put a video up on the screen that I did basically explaining in great detail what the age of Aquarius is. But to summarize it in this video, we're experiencing a massive shift in energy once Pluto shifted over into Aquarius. Pluto was stationed in Capricorn for about 226 years and migrated, that's what I like to call it, itself into Aquarius, and will be stationed there for the next 20 years. Pluto is a planet all about personal transformation, rebirth, systemic oppression, ego death. It's literally the planet of all planets, in my opinion. It definitely did a number on me. That's where I feel as though Generation X is now coming up to the surface as well, with this shift in energy and experiencing broader awareness on the shift itself. I personally empathize with Generation X. Having parents both in Generation X, I would consider Generation X to be the survivors of this entire era, with baby boomers and leading right into millennials. You've got the Gen X era of individuals who didn't really have much of an advancement in life. Whereas me being a millennial, I was brought up under computers and a more well-advanced system. And then as you notice, the system continues to just develop greater and greater and greater. Whereas Generation X, there wasn't really computers then. You know, like I said, they struggled with the .com in 2008. So there wasn't enough advancement in that area. So I would call that era kind of like a middle era. At the end of the day, what I'm basically trying to say is I recognize that Generation X was around during a large transitional period of time. And like I said, me being a millennial, I came into my era more self-sufficient than ever. But I definitely recognize the sacrifices that Generation X did. And I feel as though there was a lot of sacrificing in Generation X and the baby boomers and going down the era versus the millennials and the Gen X and Gen Alpha and the next generations to come. So I definitely see that, and I definitely recognize that. So how does one support Generation X during this time? As we're all experiencing this collective consciousness, I just basically feel as though we are now opening the door for Generation X to come in and have this clear understanding, as you know, us millennials and Gen Z are now experiencing when it comes to a broader awareness and a broader insight on life. If anything, I would just encourage you to help them on this transformative journey, because it's not easy. And given the upbringing that Generation X came up from, I would have just more conversations around why there is this massive shift between old world and new world, and having this clear understanding why a lot of us are moving more toward manifestations and spirituality and collective consciousness, because we're of a mindset of higher awareness and just a higher learning and a higher knowing of who we are. Because there's such a fall in the representation of society today, you know, with like the celebrities and the government and all of these things finally being addressed, right? I just feel as though a conversation should just be had and giving good grace to Generation X, because I can tell that with millennials, we're in a space where we kind of already knew that this was going to happen. Basically things that we had already predicted were going to happen, but now it's actually happening. Generation X had such a strong structure and a strong hold. I feel as though Generational X was brought up under tight structure, whereas millennials had, yes, we had structure, but we also had ease, and we were able to experience a lot more. And that's where I feel there's that slight difference between the millennials and the Generation X, because Generation X solely was brought up under a structure that could not change. that was that transitional period. Whereas once they finally knocked it down, us millennials, we had more leeway and we had more opportunities to do and become greater and better things. Generation X was a middle era, and they were a middle era who wasn't basically allowed to make noise. And if they made noise, the consequences were heavy. Whereas millennials, you know, we can say any and everything, and we have that opportunity to voice and address our opinions, especially now. But whereas Generation X, I feel as though they weren't in a space to express that. Again, having that going into this understanding as to why they're waking up makes so much more sense. And then adding elements of the energy that we are now experiencing with Pluto transiting into Aquarius, it's just another unfolding of this powerful energy that we are now experiencing today. And energy is real too. So the fact that Pluto did its shift in Aquarius, this is the reason why it's happening now, just like everything else that is finally coming up to the surface. This isn't going to be the first experience that we have, maybe that for Generation X, but there's so much more to be unfolded during this time. And keep in mind, we have 20 years of this. So imagine these next couple of years, there's going to be a massive shift. What is your insight regarding this Generational X mass awakening? Comment below. I'm curious to know what your insight is and what you think about this collective consciousness that is finally waking up to what is actually happening on in the world. I definitely want to continue this conversation. This is only halfway in the year, and so much has already been released and addressed, and I basically just walk around with a whole thing of popcorn because I really don't know what else is to come. But when this experience happened, I welcomed it with open arms because the more the merrier when it comes to collective consciousness. If you enjoyed today's video, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. It helps me reach more viewers like you. And if you have anything to add or share to today's video, comment below. I would love to hear your experiences or perspective on today's topic. So let's continue this conversation. That is all the time that we have today. Again, if you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Thank you so much for watching today's video, and I will see you next time. Peace.